Hey up lads, hey up loves, it's the Yorkshireman again, and I'm here with part 4 of my James O'Brien compilation. Now, in this particular one, James is going to be talking a little bit about religion, and religion is a very touchy subject in this day and age, although I don't know why it should be. I think we can all agree now that it is pretty much bollocks. But, you know, if religion gets you by, if that little bit of spirituality or routine gets you through the day, then fair enough. But don't bring it to my door and don't start shoving it down my throat, especially when I think it's all a load of crap. The problem is, a lot of people, and particularly the regressive left, they think that religion should be treated specially for some unknown reason. And they always say, oh, we should just treat all religions the same. But unfortunately, some religions at different points in different periods in history can be worse than others. And I think I don't need to express which one I'm talking about there at this particular juncture in our human history. But we're going to see James O'Brien tackling religion now and just see if anybody can spot the contradiction in these particular clips here.
There's nothing in the Bible about this sort of thing. You just, because you're going back to the Old Testament and because you believe that the first human was created out of clay and then God took a rib out of him and built a woman, because you believe that there's something unchristian about transgender.
Hey, transgenderism, that's always good for a laugh, innit? Well, not on LBC, because it's been coming up quite a lot recently. And in this particular discussion, it's coming into the realms of religion. Now, the woman who he's talking to is basically making the point that because of what it says in the Bible, the idea of transgenderism is complete rubbish, okay? Well, to be honest with you, love, I think the idea of Adam and Eve is complete rubbish, because I consistently treat all religions equal in the fact that I think they're all batshit crazy, right? And I never once pretend to be saviours or protectors or defenders of a particular religious group. Now, this is not to get mixed up between the people and the religion, because you can hate a religion, but that doesn't mean that you hate the people, alright? You just don't like what they believe, you think it's rubbish. That doesn't say anything about them as individuals. But the thing is that James O'Brien, his consistency doesn't often show, and we'll have a look at that now, shall we? And we'll come back to the transgender thing in a minute.
Well, there is written in the Bible, and I can't go. I mean, I will come back to you with. There are things in the Bible, even in the New Testament, that talks about things like that.
Yeah, but just to focus on, it's because you believe that Adam was made out of clay, and then God took a rib out of his chest and built Eve, and then they had children, and their children bred with each other. It's like brothers and sisters having children together, and because you believe so passionately in that, you think that transgender is unchristian.
Well, I don't see why not. Jesus used to dress like a bit of a woman, didn't he? No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. It's very difficult to take this particular debate seriously because it is so bloody ridiculous. We're having a discussion, or rather, James O'Brien is having a discussion about transgenderism and Christianity. God help us. No irony intended. Now, obviously, there isn't going to be anything in the Bible about transgenderism, is there? Because it's a relatively new thing, innit? And that's not to say that there aren't people throughout human history who have dressed up as women or dressed up as men or felt that they were born in the wrong body. But this notion, this sort of lefty Western idea of transgender is only a new thing. Now, forgetting religion for a second, going to the biological point of view, I have a bit of a problem with this notion of transgenderism, because what it does is it basically tells everybody that you have to play along with somebody pretending to be something that they're not. You have to use the right words, you have to use the right nouns, and if you don't, then you're some kind of a bigot or a bloody criminal and you should be locked up for it. Like a heretic or a sinner. Ironically, kind of like religion, really. Let's get back to that, shall we?
I'm saying that God doesn't make mistakes when he makes the male and the female. That's all I'm saying.
Well, no, you're not, because you're basing that observation upon a belief system that's fairly formal and codified in the Old Testament, and it involves the children of Adam and Eve having sex with each other and having children. So your belief system endorses familial incest.
James O'Brien. Oh, Mr. Jobby, you can't go around insulting people's belief systems like that. You sound almost like a bigot or a racist. Now, I know that those labels do not apply to James here because he's just exercising his freedom of speech and the fact that clearly he doesn't believe in the same thing that this woman believes. And I think he's completely entitled to do that because I would do the same thing. All right, he's been a bit of an arrogant twat about it and he's talking over her. There's no change there. Now, just for the sake of consistency, I'm just going to put this out there. Do you reckon that James O'Brien would do the same thing to any other religions out there? Do you reckon that he'd point out the contradictory and backwards and nonsensical things that you might find in, say, the Jewish religion, or in Buddhism, or, dare I say it, in Islam? Do you think he would do that? Do you? Do you think that he would do that?
But rejects transgender.
Okay, so do you know what it is, James? This is why people like who are Christians or sort of get involved in certain conversation. And I was hesitant in calling because I'm telling you what I believe.
Yes.
I've not said anything that I would say that I would never show love or.
No, I kind of. Unfortunately, you can say that you would always show love, but I was keen to get to the Christian element. I was very honest about what I wanted. I wanted someone to explain to me how this is a Christian position, and I've just described your position to you, and now you're cross with me because of what it sounds like.
Now, watching James O'Brien leaning back in his chair there, just loving the fact that he is winding this woman up, or I suppose the modern phrasing of it would be that he's triggering her, although she doesn't sound like she's that triggered. She's not shouting, she's not having a go, she's just explaining her point. She's saying that she doesn't believe in the idea of transgenderism because it doesn't appear in the Bible. And again, I've said I don't care either way because I don't take the Bible seriously. And I also say that she is entitled to her belief in the same way that I am entitled to mine, and the same way that James O'Brien is clearly entitled to his. But I think it's very easy, though, to lean back in your chair looking like proud cock when the person isn't actually in the room with you. I'd be very interested to see if James O'Brien had the balls, and I don't really think he does, but if he had the balls to have an actual proper discussion with somebody to their face, particularly down some of the pubs where I like to go and have a pint, I don't think he would be quite so cocky, stroking his hair and grinning like a chimp playing with its own cock on a tyre. Also, when he says, I've just described your position to you, I love the idea that leftists can tell people what they think and what they feel and what they are. Even when they say, no, this isn't what I think, this isn't what I feel, that isn't who I am. They go, no, you are, I'm telling you that you are. The arrogance of these people, and particularly James O'Brien. Again, his show is not for having open discussions and sharing ideas. It's just for him to sit on his swivelling throne in his studio and belittle people who aren't there behind the safety of his microphone with a button that he can press to get rid of people who he disagrees with. And you might think that I'm bullshitting about that, and you might be wondering why I'm getting so wound up. Well, the next set of clips, unfortunately I couldn't get the video for it, but I've done a nice little artist rendition of James O'Brien in his studio, and just have a listen to how he suddenly changes his whole stance on religion when this caller calls in about the Islamic terrorist attacks.
Richard's in Maidenhead. Richard, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I just want to say I agree with you to a point, and I think any reasonable person knows that most Muslims have absolutely no part in this, and that, you know, it is a real a fundamental and a very, very minority group who are doing this.
So there we go, we've got the logical bit out of the way first. And again, I think we pretty much all agree on this, that when a terrorist attack is committed by members of the Islamic community, of course the attack is carried out by those individuals, and it's not the community as a whole. It's not all Muslims, and I can't believe we have to keep saying that phrase, but it's the only way that we can just keep plugging up that hole from all the regressive shit that keeps pouring out. We know that it's not all Muslims, and the fact that people have to state that to back up their point is bloody ridiculous. But this isn't as ridiculous as it gets. Oh no, this call gets even more ridiculous than that.
But I think an apology is needed. You said before that if a Geordie person was doing this, should all Geordies issue an apology, and that was kind of a little bit ridiculous. But
why? Why is it any different?
Lads, lasses, why do you think it's different? Can any of you tell Jobby the Troll why it's different when somebody commits a crime in the name of Islam and someone commits it in the name of Newcastle? Well, first of all, people don't go around killing people in the name of Geordies, do they, James? But people do go around killing people in the name of Islam, right? That is why it is different, James. And when people like the caller here, who clearly is very nervous to voice his opinion because he knows that somebody like you is just going to shit on him from a great height. Now, I think that the gentleman that was calling in has got his wording slightly wrong, because what he said was an apology is needed, but what he should have said, in my opinion, is that condemnation was needed. Because whenever there is an Islamic terrorist attack, you tend to find that people from the Islamic community tend to go very quiet. There isn't enough condemnation, or we don't hear it enough, or we don't see it enough. What they will say is, this is nothing to do with Islam, and this is not all Muslims. Well, I agree with one of those statements. Of course, it isn't all Muslims, because that would be bloody stupid. But one thing, unfortunately, I do not agree with is when they say this is nothing to do with Islam. Well, it is, isn't it? Obviously. If people are doing it and they're telling us it's in the name of the religion, then obviously it's got something to do with Islam, hasn't it? And I think instead of trying to defend the reputation of the religion, they should be looking at the ugly truth in the face, realising there's a problem, and doing something to sort it out from within. I think that's fair enough to say. And I think when people say they'd like to hear a little bit more condemnation instead of apologetics, I think that's fair enough to say as well. But heaven forbid you say that to one of these regressives like James O'Brien, because they will come down on you hard and stupid like he's about to now.
Why should Abbas, the last caller, apologise for what these murderers in Paris did?
Well, because I think the alternative is that there is no apology.
Have you apologised yet?
Apologise for what?
The murders in France on Wednesday.
Why would I need to apologise for that?
Well, why does Abbas? He was in Berkshire.
Here we are again, at the edge of the rabbit hole, about to plunge down into Wonderland. James O'Brien's going to lead this guy all around the houses whilst trying to make him look stupid, when ultimately the only one who's going to come out of this whole discussion looking like an absolute dickhead is James. But let's carry on, shall we?
Well, no, because they're doing it in the name of Islam. If something was done...
Not his Islam. They might have been doing it in the name of Richard's. Wouldn't mean it was about you.
Oh, I'm going to try my best with this, I really am. So, what James is saying here is that individual Muslims can have their own version of Islam. So therefore, none of it is connected. Well, James, if that's the case, why do they all bother reading the same books? Why do they all bother going to the mosques? They could just stay at home and do their own rituals. It's almost like making an avatar, isn't it, James? On World of Warcraft, you can just make it your own. Except it isn't, is it, James? It's a very broad religion that has different sects, but essentially it all comes from the same book, doesn't it? So, if that was the case, there wouldn't be a fucking religion, would there? There wouldn't be something called the Islamic community, would there, James?
No, there has to be some... These people are committing acts of terror in the name of Islam.
Not in the name of his Islam.
I know, I do understand that.
So if I went and blew somebody up now and said I'm doing it in the name of Richards everywhere, you would feel you had to apologise? If that wasn't a shoe bomber called Richard Reed, have you apologised for him yet?
You're making it a bit ridiculous.
No, you are.
No, I think you'll find you are, James, you aggressive, arrogant, bog-eyed, bridge-dwelling twat. I mean, it's almost like he's trying not to understand where this guy's coming from. And I think that, in all honesty, he really doesn't want to, because he, like all the other members of the regressive left, have sided with the Islamists. For whatever reason, I don't know. But apparently, they have. Now, the analogy of somebody committing a terrorist attack in the name of Richard, and everyone in the world called Richard has to apologise for it, is absolutely bloody ridiculous. Because there aren't 1,000-year-old texts in the name of Richard which talk about people who aren't Richard and say that they're inferior and deserve to die in the name of the god of Richards, is there, James? It's like if a soldier goes on a killing spree. Are all the soldiers in every army of the world expected to apologise? No, they're not. If a postman suddenly goes crazy and kills 3 blocks of people, do we then say that all postmen everywhere need to come out and condemn it? The Yorkshire Ripper didn't commit all of his crimes in the name of people from Yorkshire, did he, you soft twat? Belief systems and names are 2 completely different things. But you and your diarrhea-soaked ball of wool between your ears that you call your brain can't accept the truth. Can't accept reality of the situation, which is why people like you should not be involved in conversations like this at all, because you're about as useful as a chocolate fucking fireguard, mate.
I'm really not. They're just...
Okay, well, tell me why you haven't apologised for the shoe bomber whose name was Richard, because Abbas has to apologise for a terrorist who said he was a Muslim.
He was a Muslim, you fucking idiot.
Take all the time you want, mate.
Okay, so these guys are from the Islamic community.
Yes, and the shoe bomber was from the community of people called Richard.
Oh, fucking hell no. It's like a straw man that's been soaked in a barrel of red herrings and is dripping in juice and thrown in this guy's fucking face. James, if just for 1 second, if you could just remove your face from your own sphincter and tell me, who are the community of people called Richards?
We need to feel some sense that there's some action in the Islamic community.
But I don't trust people called Richard anymore, so when are you going to apologise?
Fucking hell. Do you know what? I have these reoccurring nightmares, and you might have had them yourself. Please tell me in the comments. But every now and again, I have these nightmares where there'll be somebody who's hanging on to me or grabbing me, and they won't let go, even if I shake them really hard. Or there'll be a person who's cackling and laughing at me, and no matter how many times I try and get rid of them and punch them in the face, they just won't stop laughing and they won't stop smiling. That is James O'Brien personified. He is my living fucking nightmare. And again, I'd love to have a conversation like this with him. Not on the radio, not in his studio, just me and him, face to face, man to troll.
It's a bit difficult to argue against you when you're being like this. I'm just trying to make a point that these people are from the Islamic community, and there needs to be a sense that...
What does that even mean? Well, what does the Islamic community mean?
Hey, so he's a little bit confused here. What does the Islamic community mean? Well, it tends to be people from a community who all believe and follow and practice Islam, James. Does that make sense to you, mate?
You don't understand what Islam is, what the Islamic community is.
Well, I know that Sunni and Shia kill each other every single day in this country on a scale that is nowhere close to what happened in France.
Oh, well, that makes it okay that those people were murdered then, doesn't it, James? I didn't realise we were doing a numbers game here. I didn't realise there was some sort of a competition going on. Is there some kind of quota that we have to meet of people being killed before it becomes a problem to you?
So what do you mean by the community? You think they're on the same side, do you, those people killing each other in Syria at the moment?
No.
So what's the Islamic community?
The Islamic community in this country.
It's just everybody who has the word Islam on their religious affiliations, even if they actually hold murderous intent towards each other.
Now, this is a point that needs to be made, that yes, there is Islam, but there are different sects within the Islamic community. So you've got the Sunnis and the Shias, you've got the Ahmadi community, you've got lots of different kinds of Muslims. So it's very funny how the regressives, when they talk about Muslims, they just talk about them all as generic Muslims, when there are in fact lots of different kinds of Muslims within the Islamic circles. And believe it or not, there are some pretty nasty persecutions and fightings and killings that go on within those different sects. There are sects that are persecuted above others. There are some that are more aggressive than others. But it's funny how the regressives who say that you're saying that all Muslims are like this do exactly the same thing. And just to point out, nobody is saying that all Muslims are like this or all Muslims are like that. We're talking about the religion. There is a big difference, a big screaming difference between people and ideas, between Muslims and Islam. There is nothing wrong with criticising an ideology. That is not the same as criticising an entire group of people. Can we be clear on that? I'm sure I don't need to explain it to you, lads and lasses, but for these people, like James O'Brien, we clearly do.
Which is bringing us back to Richard. Everyone who's got Richard on their passport is part of the Richard community. You're allowed to admit you've made a mistake, my friend.
No, I'm not going to admit that I've made a mistake, because there needs to be a sense that we as a country...
I'm going to interrupt you there, Richard, which I think some might consider an act of mercy.
After that absolute festering, steaming heap of regressive shit that came out of James O'Brien's mouth, how can he have the bollocks to turn round to somebody and say, it's alright, you can admit that you made a mistake? No, James, you made a mistake. In fact, no, you didn't make a mistake, mate. You made a bloody farce out of, I might add, a very, very important conversation that really needs to be had, but people like you seem hell-bent on stopping it from happening altogether, because it doesn't go with your regressive agenda, does it, James? Now, you may remember I mentioned that this particular call, apart from the fact that it made no sense, pissed me off quite a lot. Now, the gentleman has called in, he knows what he wants to say, and he's trying to get it out, but James keeps stopping him. Now, when the gentleman persists and is consistent in what he's saying, you might hear something quite interesting in the background. Just have a listen.
No, I'm not going to admit that I've made a mistake, because there needs to be a sense that we as a country...
I'm going to interrupt you there.
And I'm going to interrupt you, Jobby. Now, did any of the lads and lasses hear it? Let me play it again.
That...
This time I'm going to add something in for you. Yes, lads and lasses, when the going gets tough, the tough press the release call button. Now, having worked in a call centre before, I remember that button very well, and I remember that you only ever used it in situations when it was absolutely necessary. You never release a call when you're speaking to somebody on the phone. But this is the regressives' saving grace, particularly when they're working on the radio, because when they get somebody who is consistent or who comes up with intellectual points and is making the host look like a bit of a twat, just press the release call button. It would be the same as if you were having a discussion with Mr. O'Brien to his face, and while you were talking to him, he just put his hand right up in front of you and said, talk to the hand. Now, of course, if James O'Brien did that to me, I'd break every one of his fingers. And of course, for legal reasons, I would never threaten James O'Brien by breaking his fingers. But to attempt to bring this path of madness back round full circle, James O'Brien has a really interesting standpoint when it comes to religion. He's quite happy to take the piss out of some of them, but yet completely deny any problems and throw himself in front of the bus for other religions. Now, for me, you have to be consistent. It's either all or nothing. Either religions are up for scrutiny and ridicule, or you leave them alone and you don't take the piss. And you don't question. Now, you're perfectly entitled to take either of those paths, but you can't have it both ways, cock. And as I said before, there seems to be this popular trend amongst the regressive left to throw themselves on the sword in the name of Islam. And no irony in that phrasing either. The truth of it is that we still have problems of religion in our society and in our world. And at the moment, there are some that are more problematic than others. But the problem is when you have people like James O'Brien who are just going to stop any kind of conversation or actual progress from happening, then the best thing for them to do is to just sit in the corner and play with their dicks while the rest of us get on with the intellectual discussion. And I think in the case of Jobby the Troll, that's the best thing for all of us. Whew. So after that particularly annoying video, I'll see you lads and lasses in the next video. For now, ta-ta!